The Lenovo Legion 7 is almost the perfect Ryzen gaming laptop, but there's at least one important issue that you need to know about. I've got the max spec version with full-powered NVIDIA RTX 3080 graphics, Ryzen 9 5900HX processor, and 32 gigs of memory. It is also available with lower specs too. You can find updated prices and check availability with the links down in the description. Overall, I think the Legion 7 has a nice build quality. It's got a metal aluminum lid and bottom panel, while the interior seems to be plastic. It's got a 16-inch 165Hz screen with good response time, decent color gamut, no backlight bleed, and it gets fairly bright. It's also got a 16:10 aspect ratio, which means there's more vertical space compared to your regular 16:9 resolutions like 1080p. Now, the behavior in games will depend on the specific game. Some games like CSGO, for instance, have support for both 16:9 and 16:10 resolutions. So if we set a 16:9 resolution like 1080p or 1440p, we just get black bars on the bottom and top of the screen. If the game supports 16:10, then it uses the full screen as expected. But there are also some games that'll run 16:9 resolutions like 1080p, but just take up the full screen, which means that they end up being a bit stretched out. It doesn't look that good, but it seems to vary by game based on that support. And I suspect that'll just be a thing until 16:10 screens are more common, which hopefully won't take too long given there do seem to be a fair few laptops with this new 16-inch panel launching, just like the new Asus Zephyrus M16 that I covered in this one. The Legion 7 also lets you disable Optimus, which does result in a speed boost in games, and you need Optimus disabled in order to use G-Sync. But if you do have Optimus enabled, you still have the option to FreeSync, so best of both worlds, a feature that most laptops don't have. It's usually either one or the other. That combined with the high-end specs in my unit, such as that full-powered RTX 3080, means we get some pretty good gaming performance. I've tested this configuration in 2 different resolutions in 13 games and compared it against other laptops in this video here, so check that out if you want to get an idea of performance. Otherwise, outside of games, raw CPU performance was also next level. It was offering the best multi-core performance in Cinebench R23 that I've ever seen out of any laptop so far, and single core performance was up there too. The keyboard is nice and clicky, and I personally liked typing on it. The touchpad is also improved over last year's Legion 7i. Last year the touchpad would flex below the chassis if you pushed hard, but that's not an issue this year. And while we're on the topic of improvements, the hinge is also an area that sees an improvement this generation. Last year people were reporting failure with the 7i hinge, and that seems to be because the metal parts down the bottom were just stuck to the lid without any further reinforcement. But this year, with these images that are available through the Lenovo parts website, we can see that there does appear to be improvements to the hinge. Plus, Lenovo have also told me directly that there are improvements. Now, unfortunately, I can't personally do long-term testing as this is a borrowed review unit that has to get sent back. I've only had it for a few weeks, so I can't say whether or not the hinges will hold up long-term. But it does at least seem that Lenovo are aware of this issue with the last-gen model and have made steps in the right direction to fix it. The Legion 7 has plenty of Rgb lighting if that's your thing. There's 6 built-in firmware effects that don't need software, so you can control the effect or even turn it on or off during boot. When Windows loads though, the Corsair iQ software will take precedence. So if you have any lighting effects set through software, they'll be applied and overwrite whatever the default firmware setting was. There's actually a really subtle problem with the Legion 7's lighting. I'm not sure how widespread the issue is, but one user so far has emailed me saying they have this too. You can't see it right now while the laptop's just spewing RGB, but the light down the front seems to be stuck. It's much more obvious if I set all the lighting to one color, like say red, or turn it off. That light down the front just seems to be stuck blue. Now, to be clear, if I do turn all the lighting off with say function and the down arrow keys like this, it is off and it's not an issue. The example before had all of the RGB set to black, which I guess is essentially off. There's a nice selection of I/O, most of which is on the back so cables stay out of the way. I liked the icons on the back above the ports. They're actually useful. It made it much easier when standing in front of the machine and plugging in cables. You don't have to turn it around. And you can optionally use this shortcut to turn those lights on or off. The Legion 7 is cooled with a vapor chamber cooler. Otherwise, inside we've got an 80 watt-hour battery, 2 M.2 storage slots, 2 memory slots, and Wi-Fi 6 to the right of that. Alright, so the battery life is that one major issue I teased in the start. As mentioned, the Corsair iQ software is used to manage the RGB of this laptop, and that was the same with the last generation Legion 7i. Now, when just sitting here completely idle and doing absolutely nothing, when plugged into wall power, I found that it was drawing 40 to 50 watts from the wall, and that was with the RGB lighting completely turned off. If I instead close the Corsair iQ software and stop the Corsair service, this drops down to 15 watts. Quite a big difference. And this is what the difference in battery life looks like with that simple change. Hinge, with the software disabled by getting significantly better battery life, and much more in line with what I'd expect with a battery of this size. Now this is at least a simple fix, just close the software and it won't drain the battery as hard. But then this means that you don't have the option of customizing the lighting. I suppose if you're perfectly fine with the 6 built-in effects, then that might not be an issue. But yeah, something to be aware of, and given that was present with the 7i last year, it's hard to say whether or not this will be fixed. It might just be how that software is. We can also further improve the battery life by simply pressing the function and R shortcut, which will change the screen's refresh rate from the default 165Hz down to 60Hz. It would have been cool if it automatically changed this when you unplug the power like ASUS laptops do, but this is still a nice easy shortcut that most laptops don't offer. And realistically, if you're running on battery power, I don't think you're going to need 165Hz anyway, especially given things like Nvidia Battery Boost cap all games to 30 FPS by default anyway, unless you're going out of your way to make tweaks. Something I personally would have really liked to have seen with the Legion 7 is fan control. Previous generations of Lenovo laptops have had the option of pressing a shortcut to simply set the fan to max speed, and that's not an option at all here. Lenovo did tell me that they didn't want to offer fan control because setting specific RPM values might confuse users who don't understand what's going on. And yeah, I kind of get that point, but at the same time, I don't see why you can't just have a hidden shortcut that you need to read the manual to know about. If you want to set the fan to max speed, then you should have the option to do it. If you don't, then don't press the shortcut. I also personally would have liked to have seen an SD card slot, but that's just the creator inside me talking. I do understand that this is a gaming laptop, so the crowd buying that might not necessarily need that. Otherwise, I didn't think the giant 300-watt power brick was particularly good for portability, and it seems like you get that same size of power brick even if you pick a lower spec model like the 3060 and Ryzen 7 5800H configuration. It's not just because I've got the max spec here. Battery drain issue aside, which appears to be due to that Corsair software, I think the Lenovo Legion 7 is a pretty good gaming laptop. There's plenty of nice features on offer that other companies simply don't have. I've gone into far more depth on the Legion 7 in a 20+ minute review on my main channel over here, so check that one out if you want to know absolutely everything else about this laptop. Take a look at this one if you want to see how well it performs in games at 2 different resolutions and compares against others, and otherwise make sure you're subscribed to both of my channels for future laptop videos like this one.